Let's begin. Do turn on your cameras. Unlock Wee Chun and Chloe. Thank you. Unless, of course, you're eating. So today what we're covering, right, boys and girls, is non-narrative comprehension skills. And when you see non-narrative comprehension, right, normally you find it in your section C of your paper 2. Okay, so in this section, sometimes we have these types of questions called literal paraphrase. Okay, so literal paraphrase. First off, let's break this down into two first. What's a literal paraphrase question? First, a literal question is where you can get the answer directly. From the passage. So a literal question is basically a question that allows you to copy, right? But then the next part says paraphrase, right? So a literal paraphrase question is after you found the answer, you need to write it in your own words. And literal paraphrase questions, right, are normally the ones that have the phrase in your own words, right? And that's where the whole difficulty level comes from. So that's what I'm going to cover today, how to actually paraphrase properly and some strategies that you can have to help you while you're practicing. Most of which actually you can just use Google, but you can't use Google in your exams and your tests, right? But during your practices, when you are just practicing on your assessment book or your past year exam paper or your homework with ADHD tuition, I highly recommend and I strongly encourage you to just go onto Google and look for synonyms and antonyms, right? Which is what I'll be covering later on as well. So it will definitely help you a lot to understand which ones have the closest meaning, right? I'll show you guys later, and tell you guys which one has the closest meaning and how to look up for closest meaning. Okay, so let's start. So here's Jimin. Jimin has joined us. Welcome to the class, Jimin. First things first, non-narrative comprehension. So, like what I said, the question is direct. That's the literal part. Yeah, the literal part. The question is direct. You can get the information directly from the text, but you must rephrase it, right? Rephrase especially the details. All right. So there's like extra stuff like in your own words. You see this phrase very commonly. Okay. Or it says explain fully in your own words. Yeah. So when you see in your own words, right? What can you not copy? What can you copy? That's the whole thing, isn't it? What can we copy? What can we not copy? We cannot copy the main four, right? We are not allowed to copy the main four. What are the main four? So we are not allowed to copy nouns. We are not allowed to copy verbs. We are not allowed to copy adjectives. And we're not allowed to copy adverbs. Unless what? Unless there is only one term available. So let's say, for example, if we are talking about the Arapama, which is the largest freshwater fish in the entire world, right? And it can be found in the Amazon River. If you're talking about that, right, we cannot rephrase the noun Arapama. All right, number one, it's a proper noun. Number two, there's no other way to rephrase Arapama just by calling it something different. Say, for example, big freshwater fish. Immediately, you are taking meaning away from the word Arapama in the first place. You can't just change the word Arapama like that. So there's only one term available for Arapama. You continue using that term. You don't try to rephrase it or change it or whatever. Okay? Or, say, for example, there's no other word that can replace maybe toilet paper, right? Now, toilet paper by itself is not a proper noun because it's not an like name or whatever. It's a name of object, toilet paper. But what can you change toilet paper to? Can you change it to maybe like waste paper? Oh, if you change it to waste paper, it changes the meaning. Waste paper could refer to paper that you don't want to use anymore, that was previously in the printer maybe, and then you've printed something wrong, you want to throw it away, you can call it waste paper. So by changing the word toilet paper to waste paper, you're changing the usage of it, you're changing the meaning of it. Let's just call toilet paper toilet paper. There's no other way to there's no other way to change it. What if we come up with something fancy? Let's call it sanitary wipes. Then the moment if we call toilet paper sanitary wipes, because it does help to sanitize us, right? And we do have to wipe with it, right? So technically it's a sanitary wipe. But the moment we say sanitary wipe, the first thing that people think of is not toilet paper. It's actually the wet wipe, isn't it? Yeah? So you have to go through all these different ideas, all these thoughts when you think about, hey, should I change a word for another word or not, right? Sometimes a word is the best if you leave it alone and you call it what people call it, most people call it. You call toilet paper, right? We don't try to be smart and give it some other alternative nickname, okay? So that's what I mean. We don't change it if it already has the best name for it, basically, yeah? But there are some that can easily be changed and people would still understand what you're talking about. For example, if I said something like handphone, right? Handphone. Most Singaporeans will understand handphone, but if I went over to Australia and I said handphone, I think some people might be confused. They say, hey, what's a handphone? But they get it, right? Basically, a handphone is a phone you can put in the palm of your hand and it's very accessible, it's very convenient. A handphone. Yeah? Now, I can change the word handphone to mobile phone. And if I say mobile phone in Singapore, some people might be confused as well. But most people will understand that, hey, when I say mobile phone, I actually refer to their handphone. Yeah? So we can replace mobile phone with handphone. We can replace handphone with mobile phone. Doesn't really change the meaning of it, the core meaning of it much. But how about toilet paper? You can't really change toilet paper, can't you? Right? So before you go ahead and change stuff, you really have to ask yourself, am I taking meaning away from the original word? If I change it to this other word, right, can it mean something else? Will people misunderstand what I'm saying over here? All right, so that's the whole thing about looking for words to substitute your keywords, right? When they ask you to rephrase it, when they say in your own words or explain fully, that kind of thing. And yes, Richun has given me another alternative. You can say cell phone as well. Right? So if I say, oh, I'm gonna go grab my cell phone, some of you might look at me weirdly and say, huh? Mr. Joel calls it cell phone, but you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about my handphone. Yeah? Pardon my cough today. I'm recovering from COVID. Okay, so what are some common ways of paraphrasing? All right. Oh, by the way, I would like to welcome our trial student today. Yes, Pala Nia Pan. Uh, can I call you Pala? Okay, Pala will do. Okay, good. So welcome to the class, Pala. And welcome back, Jimin. So, when we are looking at paraphrasing, right, we either find synonyms or we look for antonyms. Synonyms are basically words that have the same meaning. Antonyms are words that have the opposite meaning. Okay? So you might be wondering, why do we, when we paraphrase, why do we look for antonyms? Normally we look for words that have the same meaning, right? Sometimes a good way to paraphrase is to say that the word is not something else. Then you can say, phrase it in another way. So for example, I can say, um, it was maybe we have a phrase that says something like, it was uh, a warm and humid day. All right. Jimin was sweating in droves at school. So her sweat were like droves of animals, right? Sweating. So in this case over here, I might not even be looking for a synonym. I might just be thinking about how Jimin actually felt. So over here, right, although warm and humid, synonyms would be something like maybe oh, why change humid to that would just weird. Lots of evaporation in the atmosphere. Moist maybe. And then for warm, you could replace it with hot, that kind of thing. So sometimes instead of just doing synonyms directly like that, right, it might actually be beneficial to me to think about how Jimin was feeling actually. And then I might not just say it was a warm and humid day. I might paraphrase it and change it to it was an uncomfortable. Because warm and humid means it's uncomfortable to Jimin, doesn't it? So it was an uncomfortable day. All right, and then maybe, sweating over here. Um, this word here, right? Sweating, right? What's another word for sweating? You could, I don't think there's another word for sweating that directly describes it like that though. But if I thought of, what's the opposite of sweating? You are like dry, right? So opposite of sweat, which means your skin is dry. So I might use an antonym over here. Instead of saying Jimin was sweating in droves at school, I want to flip it around and say um, Jimin was hardly, um, or maybe you can say Jimin's uniform was hardly dry, right? Was hardly dry at school. Something like that. So hardly dry also means not dry kind of thing. So in this case, I'm actually using like an antonym because the opposite to sweating is actually being dry. So I'm using like opposite meanings, right, to capture the same meaning but in a different way. So I use different words. So this is what we say. This is what we call paraphrasing. Okay. So we use synonyms, we use antonyms, and then we change the sentence structure as well when we paraphrase. So for example, over here we have um, passive to active voice. That's one way to do it. Passive voice is when you switch the active. Okay, let me just show you. The one at the bottom here, right? This is active voice. We know it's active voice because the form of it is the subject, verb, object. Whereas for passive, right? This is passive over here. Passive is the opposite. We move the object to the front, and then the verb over here, and then the subject after that. So it's OVS instead. So we can switch sentences